Yeah,
Hello, good morning. Today, our guest is Professor Kent Deng, and we're going to be talking about the micro divergence. Hello, Professor. How are you doing?
I'm fine, thank you. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Great. So, Professor Deng, I've been reading your work for some time, and I'm particularly impressed by a paper you co-authored some years ago on the micro divergence. Our listeners, they have an understanding of the great divergence between the West and the rest, particularly Western Europe and China. Why did the West surge ahead of China? This is what the great divergence debate is really about. But today we're going to talk about the micro divergence and we're going to focus on Venice. What's the micro divergence?
You're right. My co-author, a professor from Bologna in Italy, we have about 2 years sort of exchange our ideas, and we realize in Venice everything is so well organized, imports and outputs, and also budgets, revenue, profits, and the guilds. Yeah, everything is highly quantified and well documented. And as a matter of fact, in Venice, you have 4 miles long archives for shipbuilding only. Now, in comparison with China, we have just 2 pages for the main armada in terms of the voyages from China to Indian Ocean and also shipbuilding. So this is a really such a contract. We just cannot understand why. So for the period of 2 years, we search, we realize three things we can say. One is the behavior of the state. In Venice, you have a state and a merchant alliance. That means the state depends on the merchant class and vice versa. Therefore, the state really protects the merchant class, and the merchant class uh, basically was made obliged to report to the state in terms of the profit, in terms of their taxation. So this is really a good partnership. And in terms of China, is something else, right? The state controlled physically and legally the freedom of artisans. So they actually, the Ming state owned the artisans, almost like served or kind of slavery. And therefore, the state called the shots. So when you look at the Venetian case, and you realize the guilds really play a very important part in the relationship with the state, because the state and merchant alliance in China, the state actually run, can you believe, the state actually run guilds, right? They own physically and legally the artisans, especially if you are good, the state really registers you, and you lost some freedom. And the guilds was organized as a state department. And this is a sort of a state and the relationship between state and artisan. Now, in China, during the Ming and Qing period, where we see the Great Divergence, we see a different alliance. That is the state peasant alliance. So in Chinese society during that time, you have four classes. So the top class is the literati class. They are the rulers. Then you have the uh, peasantry, the farming class. Then you have the artisan class. The artisan class really is second class citizen or third class citizen. At the bottom of that, you have the merchant class. So in that regard, the approach is different because the state seems to run a lot of things, and we then see a very different approach in terms of, for example, the degree of numeracy, the degree of literacy of China's artisans. we don't see a lot of written records to show that Chinese artisans were literate or numerate. So, but you see the opposite in Venice. All the artisan members of guilds and especially merchants, they were well educated, highly numerate. So this is one how we see the micro level Great Divergence. We call it micro Great Divergence. So this is at the household level, at the firms level, guilds level. We see strike difference between China and Venice, Italy. Yeah, does this make any sense?
Of course it does. I've been listening. That's why I don't speak. You can't listen and speak. If you want to learn, you have to be silent.
All right.
Yes.
Thank you.
And I and also my listeners, we prefer when the guest speaks.
All right. Okay.
Yes, that's what we like. So you can
Yeah,
continue. But I'm going to ask some questions.
certainly.
Renaissance Italy, Venice, the
Yes.
Arsenal Company. What happened during Venice in that era in relation to the Arsenal Company? What was the Arsenal Company?
The Arsenal Company really is if you like, a kind of a joint effort between the state in Venice and artisans and the merchants, because Venice was a powerhouse during this time in the Mediterranean shipping and naval, if you like, endeavors. Yeah, so it is terribly important for a small state like Venice to have a focus. So they believe, building their navy to protect their navy for the sake of trade really is the lifeline of the Venetian growth and development and the Venetian, if you like, hegemony across the Mediterranean world, if you like. Because the Venetians actually controlled both sides in terms of Italy and also in terms of Levant, yeah, in the Middle East and North Africa. So for them, Navy plus the merchants, maritime merchants, really supply and guarantee the prosperity of the Venetian domestic economy. On the other hand, in China, you have certainly a mother, being a mother, running a sort of a quite impressive trade or maritime link between China and the rest of South Asia, even to the Arab Sea, for about 3 decades. But that is mainly for showing China's power, China's willingness to, for example, to have a diplomatic relationship with the rest of Asia. But it doesn't really suggest that China needs a lot of trade during that time, although trade did happen. So in that regard, the Ming Armada run for 30 years. They have at its peak, they have a fleet of about 200 vessels, very large size, and they go, on a tour, a tour of showing goodwill to the rest of Asia, but they don't have that mentality of controlling trading routes. They don't have that need to create a kind of a monopoly upon which you run a good life. So because the Chinese economy at that time really was based thoroughly on farming, right? So it is kind of a icing of the cake. So it is kind of a not so necessary. So therefore, China built launch ships. They have a navy. They can show off their strengths. They even engage with certain navies in Asia, and they won certain battles, but they never have the same kind of a persistent mentality as Venetians, because for Venetians, really, this shipping really is their lifeline. In China, is something else. So you can see the behavior and alliance between the state and the other agents are very different from, if you compare the Venetian case and Ming China's case. Yeah. So that's really is something we observed. That's not about 5 years ago, before COVID. We observed. So we created this paper to call colleagues' attention that this may be the secret upon which a great divergence is really solidly based. Yeah. So this is what our discovery really, we want to use this case to open a new line of investigation to say, look, although great divergence dealing with macro level differences, but if you look at Chinese firm level, China's skills level, China's artisans level, they all look different from the advanced part of Europe, be it Italy. Thank you.
Professor Deng,
Yeah.
here is a snippet from a person called Baldissera Greccio. It is of particular importance. It's in your document on page 7. And the question that I'm going to pose is against the backdrop of this document. Was the Arsenal Company underpinned by rational management? Because this document speaks to the organization of the company. The scheme is permeated by a performative principle that viewed an implicit notion of efficiency, not as a tool for maximizing economic returns, but as a moral imperative for the safety and prosperity of the Venetian Republic. And the operative word is efficiency. Efficiency. And this document, as I said, it was prepared by somebody called Baldissera Greccio. So was the company undergirded by notions of efficiency?
Right. I would say, the best person to answer this question will be my co-author, although he's not aware of this interview. But from our exchange of ideas over the period of 2 years, he dig it up really hard in the archives available for him in Venice, and he this is one of the cases he paid a close attention to. What he suggests, or the document suggests, is that in the early days, playing safe is as important as making profit. Yeah. So I think this is why we call it a rational choice. This is because I think the Venetians were under the pressure of, for example, competition from the Turks. Yeah. And so play safe is number one, and then profit, rather than profit and profit and profit. So I would say, from my understanding as a co-author, this is a very different from China again. The sort of a safety first issue doesn't seem to appear anywhere in the Chinese archives or document. Rather, they say we did this and this and this. A, there's no mentioning of profit, and B, there's no mention of risks. So because the whole endeavor of the Ming Armada was not actually making money, and also because they have the overwhelming force as a navy at that time over any enemy. So for them, a risk is not an issue, but it is issue for the Venetians because it's a small republic. Yeah, they have limited resources. Playing safe is as important as making a lot of money. Yeah, that's what I can actually figure it out. I'm sorry, I cannot be more helpful. Thank you.
No, you were helpful enough.
Oh,
We don't
great.
have all that time to speak. So when I ask these questions, you respond in, let's say, 5 or 10 minutes. You don't need to give an entire lecture. That's just not possible.
Excellent. Thank you. So you are happy. Yeah,
Yes, I am happy.
good.
And I'm also interested in the organization of labor because you do note in this paper that labor was organized in a particular context to minimize theft. And I find this interesting. So it's an example of what some would call early scientific management.
Correct.
Yes.
Early science management really is a behavior of the merchant class and also a basically fee-paying government, right? Because you need to calculate every penny in terms of labor costs, material costs, resource costs, yeah. And this is really the essence of modern capitalism. I think Venetians are, easily qualified as a first group to really to adopt this new way of management. Whereas in China, to our quite surprise that although they calculate materials inputs, for example, how much wood or timber you need to build a ship, and how much metal you need to facilitate, for example, the building of a ship hull, how many pieces of weapons you need for a navy. In terms that material calculation, absolutely, they put every inch. But other than that, in terms of labor input, nothing is available. Yeah, there's no labor cost, and there's no financial cost. So as if they only concern, among many things, how much or how big is the pile of materials the state would need to build that navy. So other issues and labor cost seems to be free, and marginal cost seems to be free, and they only need to amass X amount of materials to build the navy. The navy was the largest in Asia, but there's no uh, any calculation of the total cost to build that navy and to maintain that navy. Yeah, so this is really not a capitalist economy, or a capitalist economy shouldn't behave like that. Yeah, so this is again a great divergence. We're so amused. The Chinese calculate to the inch in terms of how much timber they need to build a large ship. And the Venetians didn't really count that way. They count how much money they need, how many workers they need, and so on and so forth. So this is they manage people, they manage money. The Chinese manage materials. Yeah, that's fascinating. Yeah, thank you.
Yes. As we established earlier, the Venetians approach management in a scientific manner.
Yeah.
So cost-cutting measures were crucial to the Venetians. They cared about numbers. there was a revolution in accounting. Was there a revolution in accounting in Venice during this era?
Yes, they have this, very famous Italian accounting practice. So they have this, double accounting, saying, my income is one way, is one column, and that's my that's my income, and then my output, my expense will be on the another column, and then we each period of accounting it is necessary and it is imperative to make both columns balanced, right? So this is a way of measuring basically your opportunity cost. Basically, every single step, every time you do things, you watch. If you're not careful, and you may not be able to balance your two columns of your accounting book. In the Chinese case, they only have a single column. They just run through, how many pieces of materials we need to build, for example, a navy or build a single ship. And, they only count what is needed, but they don't count what is actually used, right? So in a way, you may argue that the Chinese practice may be very, very wasteful. Yeah, they may actually call for more materials than they really need. Yeah, because they don't need to have that balance periodically. But the Venetians, yes, every month, every half year, every year, they need, this is really for their mindset and for their comfort, they have to make both columns equal. Yeah. This is really very highly quantifiable, highly sophisticated capitalist practice. So the Chinese practice seems to be quite casual. They don't really care if you fail, right? So no wonder, I mean, Venetians built a navy to dominate, it's a very small republic, to dominate a huge body of water known as the Mediterranean for such a long time. Thank you.
And further, what's fascinating about the arsenal is that although it was such an eminent company, it was not concerned with profit, as you say in this piece. It cared more about preserving the common good.
Yeah. So I would say the arsenal in Venice, they have two kind of practices. One is, if okay, they make money, but at least they make Venice safe, right? So that means sometimes they can bear some costs, so long as the costs are not too heavy. Yeah, so they have the obligation basically to provide public goods, sailing, and also naval protection. So that's what they do. But from the Chinese point of view, both functions are not seems to be obvious. Yeah, and we have a complaint towards the end of the 30-year-long China's naval supremacy made by the Ming Armada that finally the imperial treasury says that this thing costs us too much. We must call it off. But that was 30 years down the track. Whereas the Venetians will report to the, basically to the state or to the power holders periodically, every month, every quarter, every half year, and every year. Yeah, so this is a completely different approach. With the Chinese, just it seems to me sleepwalking all the time until they realize, well, gosh, this is so costly. We must quit it all. Yeah, that was 30 years later. Yeah.
Another difference between Venice and China is that the shipbuilding policy in China was derailed by the states,
Yes.
by the Chinese state. The
Yes.
Europeans for a long time acquired new skills to enhance the quality of shipbuilding, but the Chinese became insulated from the rest of the world
Correct.
and put controls on trade. Therefore,
Yes.
their shipbuilding would have derailed relative to the West.
Yes. Well, the Chinese built a navy, and that navy it looks like almost like a floating city. Yeah, so they don't really see the necessity to build a navy with very fast ships. So the Chinese ships during that time were very slow. On average, the speed is about 5 um, 5 miles per hour, while the European ships during the same similar period should be 3 times faster, right? So why? Because the Europeans concerned about profit making, to lower your cost, because the faster you travel and the more turnover you will enjoy, and then more turnover means more profit, right? So this really should apply to the Venetian practice. They have a relatively small budget and small fleet, but they run very efficient business and very fast ships. So and this I will call it a PPP, private and public partnership in Venice. Yeah. So every partner try its very utmost best, yeah, to make the whole fleet, the whole Venetian maritime practice highly efficient, more efficient than anybody else at the same time. Well, the Chinese really is state and state and state is SSS, not PPP. Therefore, the state, from the state point of view, they have tax revenue, and they don't. If they run anything, in red, the officials personally wouldn't take any money out of their own pockets. Therefore, they just tax people more, and to them, efficiency really is not a concern. Yeah, and so long as they have tax revenue, everything should work. Yeah. So this is a different approach. This is not capitalist approach, but the Venetians PPP, private partner, private and public partnership, really is even today practiced in the West. Yeah, this is the best of both worlds, right? So I think the Venetians actually cracked the secret of efficiency, and also they built a successful state and the merchant alliance. Whereas in China, the whole political agendas and the whole economy is based on state and peasant alliance. Therefore, capitalism really is not does not have a good time, basically. Therefore, as we discovered in our study, Chinese skills were overwhelmingly organized by the state, and the Chinese laborers, the workers, had rather low human capital quality. They are not necessarily literate. They are not necessarily numerate, and this is very different from Venice. And also, they don't even necessarily have their personal freedom. Legally, they are kind of state slaves. That removes that will remove a lot of incentives. Because slaves are we know are not very efficient workers in any society, right? Thank you.
Professor Deng,
Yep.
you and your co-author are quite adept at observing critical differences between China and the West. You note, in China, firms were dominated by family relationships.
Yep.
How different was China in micro business practices? First, Chinese firms were predominantly
Yep.
owned and managed within a family clan. Secondly, genuine joint stock companies emerged very late in China in the late 19th century. And you
Yep.
also note that businessmen did not learn to read and write, even though the Chinese have been literate for centuries.
Yep.
I think
The
you may go ahead and speak.
Yeah, this is the shocking findings. One of the findings we made during our co-authorship, and it is true that the Chinese tend to have a small, very small scale and fragmented businesses based on families. Whereas in Venice, you have organized approach, organized by merchants, organized by guilds, organized by states, and so on and so forth. And the question is why the Chinese tend to be very small, fragmented in their business practice. I think this, I'm speaking on on behalf of myself, not my co-author. I think the problem really is property rights. If you property rights are not protected in China, the best way, therefore, to say to avoid business risks will be between your loved ones, that is your family members, because you believe that they are unlikely to cheat yourself, right? Simply because if somebody cheat you, there's no law to protect your interest.
Remember,
So
Professor Deng, in China, law basically meant punishment.
yeah, yes. So that because the property rights, especially for artisans, was such that if you, for example, let's say have a joint venture with another group of artisans, should anybody cheat on you, the law won't protect you, won't necessarily protect you. So you're better off to actually turn to your own family members. So that itself limited China's scale, we call it economy scale. So it's always family-based businesses, unless that is you are called upon by the state saying, we build large ships, well, we need 100, 200, 1,000 families. You must come to serve the state for the in the first half of the year or second half of the year. So they have this rotation, rotary system to actually organize different families to come to a location, and they work them out very hard. So in that particular context, still the individual artisans or merchants do not necessarily have their property rights protected, because the state can stop what they're doing, basically stop their own businesses, private business, and then say, you come to us and serve like a soldier. So you have to give up all your current interest or current engagement with your businesses. So that, because if you every year you will have 3 months, half year serving the state, can you actually continue at home a big business? I doubt it. You're better off just have a small business on yourself, and you can start anytime, you can stop anytime. In Venice, it's different. In Venice, it's different. The state and the firms and the guilds, they have a synergy. They have a goal. Let's build 100 ships, yeah, and then the shipbuilders, the companies, and the government funds will come to that point in a synergy, and they start working again. And the guilds certainly protect interest and also property rights of all artisans and the firms. So this is again is a capitalist approach. It's basically rule of law. In China, it's not a rule of law.
Ruled by
Rather,
law.
yeah, you obey government orders, and the government orders turn out to be laws, and the orders can change. But in Venice, the laws are not terribly changeable. They have a stability. Everything's predictable, it seems to me. But in China, everything seems to be quite arbitrary. Again, then we explain this why and how the Chinese run small family firms, consistently over a very long time. I think this is the best way and safe way to actually produce something and to make a living. If you go beyond your family boundaries,
Yes.
you're going to have a lot of risks. And the
And
state can
you
take it.
innovate more and make more money. So the Chinese system inhibited progress. It didn't lead to large scale corporations like what eventually occurred in the West.
Correct. Inventing, for example, paper currency really is forced a kind of a invention, because basically state run out of options. They don't have a lot of copper. They don't have a silver. They use a lot of iron, for example, as as the material to make money. So eventually, if you use iron, it's called a base metal currency. You may as well use paper. So this is not this in Chinese invention really is not we don't suggest this is an advanced sort of a monetary system. Rather, it's a forced choice because the severe shortage of certain materials for monetary purposes. Yeah.
All right. So what you're basically saying is that the invention of paper money in China is exaggerated as an achievement. Is that what you're saying?
Correct.
All
Indeed.
right. So
Correct.
we're wrapping up. We're
Oh,
wrapping up.
we
Yes,
are.
yes,
Okay.
we are wrapping up. But before we wrap up, I must say that I follow your work and I read your papers on colonialism with Anne Booth on
Oh,
Japanese
yeah.
colonialism. Yes.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Well, I'm completely flattered. Thanks so very
So
much.
yeah, so actually, I don't know why I've been following you for a longer time.
Oh,
I follow
really?
Anne Booth. I follow Anne Booth, but I've been
Yeah.
following you for a longer time. But interestingly, when I read the paper, your name was present, but I saw Anne Booth's name because she's a bit of an expert in that arena.
Yes.
It was
Yes.
just a couple of minutes ago, I was looking at your CV and I said, what? Kent Deng wrote that paper with Anne Booth? How could I not see his name?
Haha, really? Oh God. Yeah. Yeah. I know Anne for a very long
So
time.
what email is she using now?
Anne has retired.
Okay, but is she interested in doing an interview?
I think so, but
Okay, so
I don't have.
call her or send her an email and get back to me, please, if that's
Yeah,
possible.
I will dig it up. I haven't contacted her for ever since the COVID.
Yeah,
Yeah,
well, okay.
God. So, um, I'm not a good correspondent in that regard. I will try to find Anne's email. I understand she has formally and finally retired, and the chances are she may move back to New Zealand. Yeah,
Okay, all right. But I would love to
yeah.
speak to her.
That's my guess. Yeah,
All right, thanks for having you.
excellent.
All right,
Thanks so
bye.
much. Yeah,
Bye.
great.